Just for you to be aware. And also then, if you are not speaking, if you could put your microphone to mute, please, so that speakers don't receive any interference. And if you are voting, if you could use your physical hand, please, if that's appropriate, especially if your virtual hand's not working. We move on then to apologies for absence. I've had one apology from Professor Paul Boyle today. Are there any others for this meeting? No? Okay. We'll move on then to disclosures of personal and prejudicial interest. Are there any declarations of interest for today's meeting, please?
Chair, there's an agenda item on PMO resource that myself, Pete Austin and Stephen Alder-Jones have an interest in. So, yeah.
Declaring that interest and leaving the meeting. Okay, thank you very much. Any other declarations for today? No? Okay. We'll move on to the minutes of the previous meeting on the 17th of December 2024. I'll happily move the minutes. Could I ask for a seconder, please?
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you very much, John. Just before we take the vote, are there any amendments? The minutes have not been notified of any, but happy to take any comments or questions if people have them. If not, are we all happy to agree the minutes? Okay, yep, thank you very much. Those are agreed. In terms of announcements of Chair, just to help with the flow of the meeting, given that a number of the people on the call today will need to leave and declare an interest, the suggestion would be that we take item 7 at the last item, so that people who need to leave don't have to rejoin. So we'll just take, if everybody's happy, we'll just take the agenda slightly out of order as printed, and do it in a more logical order, given that people have declarations to make. So if everybody's happy with that, we'll move on to public questions. Al, have we received any public questions today?
No public questions today, Chair.
Okay, we'll move on then to item 6, which is the third quarter monitoring report, and I'll introduce Chris Moore. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is the standard report. It's for the period up to the end of December. It highlights really the position in both the investment and the general revenue expenditure. It's in 3 parts, and the first part is referencing the Joint Committee and the POMO expenditure. So I'll take you to Appendix A, which is at the back, which summarises the position. As you can see, there is a slight underspend or a reasonable underspend in respect to the POMO office. That is mainly as a consequence of we've actually made a definitive decision not to re-employ 2 members of staff that were there in the earlier years, which has actually helped with the balance in the budget. Most of the other smaller items, like the Joint Committee function, accountable body function, are there or thereabouts. The other uniqueness about this report is around the interest. We all know that some of the projects have delayed from the original plan when we set the Joint Committee up originally. We are holding a certain amount of cash for some of the projects, and that is earning interest. Interest is higher as a consequence of the world and national dynamics on what you would have necessarily expected at this point in time. So there's about £3 million worth of interest estimated by the end of the year. That will come in and that will go back out as per the Joint Committee agreement back in the early days of the Swansea Bay City deal, to the constituent authorities. But that actually sort of lifts up both the expenditure and the income side of the report. The summary is, at the bottom, is that we're drawing slightly more from balances, and that's because the flow of income out to the projects is down on where we would have expected. Original plan was part of the budget, there would have been 723,000 going out. It's only 248,000. That is down to the draw of where we are with the projects, and that's illustrated in the other part of the report, which means that actually we are short on the year in terms of funding. It does indicate that by the end of the year, and that we may go into a negative balance going forward. I'm not uncomfortable with that because we know we got the income flows coming in, and I know we're looking at, and it's a report later on the agenda, the longer term position of the scale of operation that we need to support the project over the 15 years. So that'll see its way out. It may, by the end of the year, there may be some projects that'll speed up a little bit, so there'll be more of the top slicing coming in. So overall, there's a 56,000 variance on what we budgeted, and we will be carrying forward a negative balance at the end of the year, which will correct itself as we go forward with our plans for next year. So that's the situation in terms of the revenue costs. If we go to the investment, which is the whole purpose of the city deal, and I'm moving now to the middle of the document and paragraphs 3.1. We indicate there, as you will recall, that originally the plan was the investment of the city deal projects would be 1.24 billion. Sorry. Latest indication, it looks like the total investment will be more in the region of 1.3 billion pound. There is a variation on a number of schemes, and it's listed there: digital infrastructure, additional 31 million, Pembroke Dock Marine, Pentre Owl, and Swansea Waterfront. Some of these projects is anticipated costs on the basis of how the inflation will run with some of the projects, and it may prove that there'll be a bit of variation, but this is best information at the moment. So we're on the right side of the overall portfolio investment on the forecasted outturn. If we move over to paragraph 3.2, paragraph 3.2 illustrates it on an annual investment basis, and in particular the year 24-25. Very difficult with these projects to get the spend on investment to fall within the years, because they are capital projects and there is drift of so many different ways, not least weather, if not other issues in terms of contract confirmation. So we are down on the investment in the current year, but obviously that will right itself longer term. So there's a variation on what we anticipated: 255 million against 165 million. So we got an 89 million pound drift, and that's sort of linked up with the top slicing I referred to earlier. But overall, as I said, the investment is actually indicated as being over the original business case that we put in originally. So some variations within the year. They're all being managed as you would expect, and hopefully at the end of the project and the end of the city deal project, we'll come out the right side of everything. So there's nothing of concern at this point in time, but there are variations within the year. Diolch.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chris, and thank you for the run through. As you say, that the first part, I guess it's a timing issue. We know that the position on the budget will correct itself next year. The second one, as you said, it's clearly showing that whilst the overall quantum is greater, which is good, some of that is driven by additional costs that we're bearing to the projects, so that are then feeding through. And again, don't want to steal the thunder of the coming reports later on in the agenda, but clearly you'll see there we're ahead in terms of drawing down things like private sector investment, which are good news elements of the overall deal. So again, open it up to Chris for any questions on his report. Are there any? Are we all okay? And in that case, then I'll happily move the report. Could I ask for a seconder, please? Thank you, Darren. And can I ask colleagues to show if they're in favour of the report, please? Thank you very much. That is agreed. And again, it was remiss of me not at the start to welcome Jan Williams to her first meeting. Welcome, Jan. Jan is the new chair of the Swansea Bay University Health Board, and we agreed Jan's membership at the last meeting. So welcome, Jan. Looking forward to working with you on the panel and on other schemes across the region. So welcome, Jan.
Thank you, Dr. Valgadere. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm really pleased to join the committee. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, thank you, Jan. We'll move then to item 7, which is Q3 portfolio monitoring. This is the update on the various elements of the portfolio, and I'll go over to John Burns. John?
Thanks, Chair. If I start with the kind of dashboard portfolio level summary. So the only RAG status, the red, amber, green status change was following last meeting's presentation on skills. They've now changed from green to amber because they reported apprenticeship figures being lower than anticipated at this stage, even though they talked about mitigations and rationale as to why. But they're now focusing on that with all partners in the region. In terms of red risks and red issues, they remain constant from previous reporting. So the 3 red risks are increase in construction cost, projects programs delivering on outputs and outcomes which are committed in the business cases, and the 10-15 maps for flood risk management. So those are remain red risks. In terms of issues, there are 2. First of all, it's about financial profile in year, and as Chris just reported, and then the other one relates to it, and it's about project financial reprofiling for future years. So those are the 2 red issues that are ongoing, and we're working with all projects and programs on those. If I move on to benefits then, Chair, there's been an incremental increase both in jobs created from 623 to 742. And investment has increased from 395 million to 459 million. So we are seeing incremental increases in those, but to note, until we do an economic appraisal, we should start seeing more jumps in those numbers. In terms of procurement pipeline, there are minimal changes since Q2, so there's nothing to report of significance there. So, Chair, if I just move on to the projects and programs, there's a lot of information in there for all board members to read in there at their leisure. But in terms of 3 things to highlight, Pentra Owl, first of all, the handover for Carnarvon Phase 1 is estimated to be May. So keep posted for that. The other one then is 7172 Kingsway. The Swansea Council took possession of the building in December 24. And tenancy arrangements are being progressed, and announcements are imminent in relation to tenancy of that. Sticking with the waterfront project, there is also the Matrix, which is now open. I went down there recently to have a look around, and it looks absolutely superb. Tenants have moved in already, and they are looking for further tenancy arrangements with businesses there as well. And then the last one is, it's not in the reports, but it's in relation to the reports, and that's in Neath Talbot, Support and Innovation Low Carbon Growth, the Switch project. And just to reiterate, South Wales Industrial Transition from Carbon Hub, that's what Switch stands for. The Welsh Secretary, Joe Stevens, announced last week an additional £8.2 million of funding for the project from the Charter Steel Transition Board funding. So that will enable that 4-acre site down in Harbourside in Port Talbot to establish not only the building, but also establish an innovation district in Port Talbot with other initiatives in Harbourside. So that's really good news for that project to now proceed. And Chair, there's lots of other information in there, but I'm not going to cover all points. We'll be here for a while. So unless anybody has any further points or any questions, which I'm happy to take.
No, thank you, John. Appreciate that, and thank you for some of the highlights there. Again, another month where we're demonstrating a lot going on across the deal. Chair's privilege just for a second, just to say I'm very pleased with the progress on 71, 72. We're there tomorrow for the formal handover of the building, where we'll be able to announce the 2 first tenants into that building. But we're confident, given the discussions we're having, that will be 100% let by the time we get to the formal opening in the spring. So that's good news, and as you said, John, good to see the figures going in the right direction on jobs and on private sector investment. Those are obviously will lag in terms of the rest of the delivery of the deal, because obviously they come on as the project's complete. But good to see that progress, and again, great to see the announcement on the investment in Port Talbot in terms of Tata Steel, and again, critical month coming up in terms of announcements of the licenses for the flow in the Celtic Sea, the floating offshore wind licenses, and again that will hopefully have positive benefits for both Pembrokeshire and Port Talbot directly, and then obviously subsequent benefits for the other councils and regions within Swansea Bay City region. So again, I think some positive stuff within the City deal and broadly aligned to the City deal that I think are going to help in terms of jobs growth and investment. So again, positive story. Some challenges though, as you've highlighted, John, in the report. We are seeing, as I'm sure everybody is, the continued long tail of inflation driving the cost pressures up for some of the major projects that we're running. So again, I know the teams are working hard to try and mitigate wherever they can those costs, and again we'll come on to that in later reports. But thank you for that, John. Open it up if anybody's got any comments, questions on anything in the report from John. No. Okay. I'll take silence as approval. Then I'll happily, I think, is this one for noting? Let me just check.
Information, Chair.
Just for information. So we'll note this one. Everybody happy to note the report? Yes. Okay. Thank you, John. We'll move then to item 8 now, which will take the construction impact assessment summary report, and welcome Peter Austin to take us through this. Pete.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the construction impact assessment report is a means by which the office monitors the increasing costs and the effect that it has on project delivery. It's been alluded to earlier in the meeting. The key elements of this report this time round are that there is no reported increase in cost in this report, and there have been a reduction of red risks. So just as a background, there is an assessment on increased costs at project level, and how that stands is then assessed via a risk assessment over a number of factors, which are in the appendices of the report there for anybody that wants to see the methodology that's applied. Up until now, and this is the biggest change for this reporting cycle, up until now the cost assessment has been done on a project level, so the individual items within the projects and programs, but the risk assessment has been done on an overall project basis, so it's the overall risk to the delivery of each of the 9. What we're doing going forward is we're going to carry on with the cost analysis at project level, but we're going to do the risk assessment on individual project level as well. And the reason for that really is that there are a number of items within the business cases going forward that are future planned. So we need to remain confident that they're going to be delivered. That confidence is there at the moment, and the full assessment of there's about 23 significant delivery items that we'll be monitoring, 7 of which have been delivered. That will take place during the next cycle of reporting, because the projects haven't yet completed the individual templates. But the key thing really is that, as you may well be aware, that the construction sector is now much more stable than it was when we initiated this report 2 or 3 years ago. It's high, costs are higher, they are increased, but the trigger for the report initially was the volatility in the construction sector, which was making it difficult to get reliable quotes, reliable tenders, reliable costs. And as I said, although things are going to cost more going forward, they can be planned and tendered for more accurately now than has been the case in the past. So what we're doing going forward is we're accepting that 7 of the projects have been delivered, any on costs have been mitigated, and we're going to focus on what is yet to be delivered. And currently, we haven't got costs for all of the outstanding projects, but we anticipate that the portfolio is going to cost somewhere around 42 million more to deliver over the next section of the portfolio delivery. And that will be reflected in the residual risks and issues that come out of it when the projects do their assessments. I think that's all I need to say on that, Chair, if there's got any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I think grateful for that one, and as we referenced earlier, that there is that long tail of inflation, and we did have that spike of inflation in construction services. It was running at over 20% at one point in time. So again, prices never come down, do they? But the rate slows, and I think that's the challenge for all of us, isn't it? But I think, look, we've got teams working, as you've alluded to, in terms of making sure they value engineer those projects. They look for other opportunities to offset some of those cost increases. And again, I know our program managers and project managers will continue to do that across the program, and that's absolutely right. But it's right also to raise the scale of the challenge that we're facing, given the cost increases that have been picked up due to the volatility in inflation over the last few years. So, yeah, Peter, I appreciate that. But opening it up, then, anybody got any comments or questions to Peter on the report? Yeah, John, Councillor Harvey, John.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Peter. I mean, a very good report, and I think, you know, to monitor risk all the way through the construction process is vitally important. It's really good to see that, you know, construction costs have probably leveled out a little bit now. That's come as a welcoming surprise for myself, which is great because we have a number of capital projects on the go in Pembrokeshire, as I'm sure all the other leaders do in their particular patches. But, you know, as you've said, Bob, I mean, it's still a volatile world out there, and you know, I think continuing monitoring is vitally important just to keep a handle on costs going forward. You know, we've got threats of tariffs worldwide. Goodness knows what's going to happen. So what I'm trying to say here is I think it's a great report. Let's keep monitoring it and keep analysing the risk going forward, because that's very good financial and prudent planning. So thank you, Peter, for the report.
Yeah, thank you, John. Absolutely. Any other comments, questions? If not, then I'm happy to move the report. Oh, sorry, this one's for information again. So can we just note this report? Is everybody happy to note the report? Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Our next one then is the private sector investment contribution report. Again, Pete, it's back to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the second report from me today. So the private sector contribution report is something that we do roughly on an annual basis to monitor where we are with the projects. And I think the important thing for the panel to note, for the board to note, is that we have a forecast at the moment which is exceeding the original profile target. And that's the key message from this report this time round. So the current investment forecast, and I do stress this is a forecast, is 669.14 million, which is circa 32 million over the original portfolio target of 637 million. So we're roughly halfway through the delivery of the city deal. A lot of the private sector contribution was forward loaded for many of the projects. In other words, it comes in following the construction stage. So this is quite a positive position for us to be in at this time. We would expect over the next 5 years to see this increasing dramatically as all of the infrastructure that we build opens and starts delivering its business case deliverables. It's a amber risk with us at the moment because, as I say, we're halfway through. We've still got a long way to go, and we continue to monitor this as we do the construction impact assessment through the quarterly reporting process. So at the moment, relatively happy with the way the projects and programs are performing. They all remain confident that they will achieve or overachieve what they expected to do at the outset. So remains a positive report.
Yeah, thank you, Pete. Absolutely. Again, I won't repeat my comments from earlier, but good to see that happening, and we acknowledge the lag in terms of when the private sector investment arrives in the timeline. Any questions or comments for Pete within his report today? Again, if not, are we all happy to note the report then? Yep. Okay, thank you, colleagues. Okay, before we move to our last item then, if I could ask colleagues who declare an interest to leave the meeting, please, if that's okay.
Yes, Chair. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Okay, and our final item today then is the future role of the POMO, and I'll call in Debbie Smith to take us through this report. Debbie.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this report is seeking the approval of the Joint Committee to commission a review of the POMO, that's the Portfolio Management Office, and to establish an officer group to undertake that review. The reason for undertaking the review is set out in paragraph 1.4 of the report, and that's really due to financial reasons. Chris Moore has helpfully attached an appendix there to set out the funding arrangements for the POMO to date. And basically, in the next financial year, we're going to run out of money if all those posts are filled. So it's a timely point really now to undertake a review of the POMO and whether we can achieve any efficiencies, whether we can achieve any improvements in terms of alignment with other governance arrangements with the CJC in particular. So if I can refer you to Appendix 2, there's some draft terms of reference there for the committee to look at. As you see, it's an officer group. We've suggested membership will be comprised of representatives from all 4 councils. So we've got Paul Thomas, the Assistant Chief Executive Officer of Carmarthenshire, and then we've got directors with responsibility for economic development from each of the 4 councils, the Monitoring Officer for City Deal, the Monitoring Officer for the CJC, and Chris Moore, who's the 151 Officer for both bodies. And we've got then the ability for, if the director isn't able to attend, then chief executives can attend in their place. I've set out there the proposed scope of the review. And you'll see that we're looking at incorporating a review of the governance frameworks, the decision-making structures, considering strategic alignment. And this is the key one, really, whether we can look at aligning the governance arrangements and the way that which the City Deal operates with the way in which the CJC operates, to see whether there are any ways that we can align operations and achieve some efficiencies and some hopefully some improvements as well if there are those to be made. And then we've got a methodology which includes consulting with staff as appropriate, clarifying the expectations of Welsh Government and UK Government, because we have to ensure that we still deliver on the obligations that we've got for the City Deal. If there is any kind of alignment with the CJC, we can't jeopardise our reporting functions in particular for the CJC. So we need to ensure that we meet government expectations on that front. And then we've got in there then to look at other delivery models to see whether there are, we can take some good practice points from how other regions are dealing with their governance arrangements, and then to look at resources that are available within each of the councils that possibly could be used to supplement the POMO resource. Because I think the point was made in Programme Board that we have quite a number of officers already within our establishments working on these City Deal projects, and they could supplement the POMO resource. So that's the report before you today, Chair. It's seeking the Joint Committee's approval to proceed with the establishment of that officer group to undertake that review. And I'm looking for any suggestions that any members may have in relation to the terms of reference or anything really in relation to the way forward. And I think we're probably looking at a projected timeline of the end of April to conclude that review with an options appraisal and then to bring it back to a future meeting of the Joint Committee. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. I'll open it up. Any comments, questions to Debbie on the paper? Chris?
Thanks, Chair. Not so much a question to Debbie, but more just an observation of context, really. When we say actually that the POMO is running out of money as to fund it, I think what we've got to make sure that we sort of recall is that when we set the project management office up originally, the anticipation was that it would run for 5 years, which was the primary period of the delivery of the projects. We never anticipated it running for the 15 years. And what part of this review needs to actually establish with Welsh Government and UK Government, what provision do we need in terms of staffing for the full 15-year period? Because once we've got over the delivery of the projects, we're into just monitoring the outputs as opposed to doing any monitoring of the projects as such. So the context is that we had the money for what we wanted to do originally, but of course things have drifted, and now we got a bit of monitoring projects and a bit of actually still delivery of projects. So that's where there's a bit of refocus needed. But what we funded originally was if you recall, the partner contributions, which were the 8 partners of 50 grand per piece, plus the 1.5% top slicing. So it's it's the growth deal and the project has sort of changed a bit, but we got to define that actually what support do we need for those years beyond the primary period of the project, I think. So it's just a bit more context, Chair.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chris. I think it's a good point to make. We're not running out of money. It's that we set a budget which is ending. That's the difference.
Yeah.
And therefore we need to decide what the budget is post that period and how the resources are organised. And I think it's the other point that both yourself and Debbie have made is a very important one. Look, when we started the city deal, 7 or 8 years ago now, it was scoped differently. The world was very different. We hadn't experienced Brexit. We hadn't had a pandemic. Lots has changed in that time. We now have CJCs in place. And as Debbie alluded to as well, we've got resources within our authorities. It's right to ask the question, what do we need going forward? And how does it link to the other things we're doing across the region? So I think it's perfect time. And I think, I think it's important we get on with it to give the staff certainty about what that future looks like. And we've got a structure that supports the work that we need to get on with, not just in the city deal, but linked to other structures across the region and other delivery mechanisms. So I think for all of those reasons, it's really important we do this and do it as quickly as possible to get that in place. So yeah, fully support what's being proposed. Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I agree with everything Chris said and you said now. I was going to touch on some of the points you raised. But I just wanted to ask, obviously, it's urgent to get on with this. Is part of the work that then gets reported back looking at an end result? Because at some point going forward, the continuation of having funding may not be there anyway. I mean, don't get me wrong, all these jobs are important and they've done a tremendous job in delivering everything that we've received. So, I'm very much in support. But at some point, and I don't know the journey, how it ends, Chris mentioned 5 years and then it's 15. Well, 15, is that a realistic end times frame that everything then will be only looking to monitor going forward? But there's a cost to monitoring as well, and outcomes, I suppose, to look at whether what originally was planned was delivered on. But again, at some point, jobs may, unless we can sort of move them into other CJC work or city deal work, I don't know. I just wondering, Rob, what work is going to be taken on to give a report back to us with sort of the final outcomes then, Deb, if you know what I mean, where, there's got to be some end at some stage. And I just wondered when that might be, or when that will result in a report back to us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Look, I mean, I think a couple of things in what you said there. I think, look, the city deal was set out as a 15-year programme, but inevitably, what you start off at the start, it may not be what you end up with at the end. I mean, it's always the way of change, but we will have an end point to the delivery of the projects and programmes that we have in the city deal. I can't see. I've worked in local government and national government for many years. I've never seen, the situation where you're not required to report on what you've delivered, and you can end that reporting, function. So I think Chris was right. There are some projects in delivery and parts of projects delivered, but we haven't delivered the deal yet. That's the point. We are not at the point where the city deal is delivered, and we won't be in that point for a number of years. And I think perhaps one of the assumptions we made incorrectly in the early days was saying that you only need a PMO function for a period of time, because I think you will need that reporting function, where it sits, how many people you need, how it's constructed, and all of that. That is definitely something that can be debated, but we will not be absolved of our responsibility to report to both governments what we're doing, and to other bodies, no doubt in Wales, around how we've used the funding from governments and the private sector and our own council. So that function will continue. But I think the opportunity, as you alluded to, Steve, is that we have other structures now in there with CJCs, etc. So again, where can we perhaps bring those two things together? And is it sensible to do so and then be able to cover a wider remit? That is one of the questions potentially in this review. So I think, look, it's the right thing to do. City Deal was always time bound. The date at which it ends, we will know when the projects are delivered. But there will still be work to do after that in terms of what has it achieved. Did it deliver all of its objectives, etc., etc., etc. So we will still be required to report to governments for many years to come, I'm sure of that. Deb or Chris, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I just confirm that, you know, my interpretation and from conversations with Welsh Government and UK Government is they're looking for the reporting for that 15-year period, which is the deal period. So after the 15 years, subject to all projects being delivered, I think the sort of environment looks slightly different, but we got to do something until the 15 years. But defining that is the bit of work that'll come into this piece of work now with Welsh Government, and we've already started a conversation with them.
Great. Okay. Any other comments, questions on this report? If not, this one's for approval. So I'm happy to move it. Could I ask for a seconder, please? Thank you, John. Can I ask if you're all in favour of the report, please? Okay, that is carried. And that gets us to the end of business for today. I've not been made aware of any additional or urgent items, but happy as always to take any that anybody may have. 2 minutes. I can't see any hands going up. So with that, can I say, diolch, thank you very much for your attendance. Look forward to seeing you all at the next meeting or in between at our one-to-ones. And I declare the meeting closed. Could I ask local authority leaders, though, just to remain on the call, if that's okay? Thank you all, everyone. Cheers now.
Thank you all. Ta-ra.